Welcome to a special edition of the Minnesota Vikings Chat podcast, pre-draft podcast. We're trying to cram in as many positions as possible before the draft on April 25. The Vikings have 11 picks this year, 2 in the first round, many holes to fill, among them defensive tackle, which is what we're going to be talking about today. And so the Vikings on depth, the depth chart for the Vikings defensive tackle is rather thin. We've got Kevin Williams, who is our best defensive tackle on the roster right now, but he's aging and is not what he was in his prime, clearly. And so he was recently renegotiated his contract to a one-year deal, so this is likely his last year on the Vikings roster. Behind him, at his position, we have Christian Ballard, who really hasn't impressed thus far as a Viking. And at nose tackle, there's LaTroy Guion, who has been okay, I guess. Fred Evans, I think, has outplayed Guion. And then we got Chase Baker behind them, but all of them, as we said, are not as good as an aging Kevin Williams. So we need to get some young blood.
Though he hasn't fallen apart. I'm so tired of reading about Kevin Williams and how he's been a disaster, and everything you read like 3 times in the article says Kevin Williams has fallen off the table and he's a disaster. And
not a disaster.
He's very good.
Exactly.
It is a point of concern, and his contract is a concern.
Yeah. But we do need to bolster the position, and we do need his eventual replacement. So that's what we're going to talk about here. We should mention the difference between the two types of defensive tackles that we're looking for. We need depth at both positions. So there's Kevin Williams' spot, which is the 3 technique. And when people talk about the 3 technique, what they're talking about is not necessarily a technique, but a position along the defensive line. And so odd numbers, when they're referring to numbers and techniques, odd numbers are offset from the opposing offensive lineman they're lining up against, and even numbers are when you're lining up head-to-head, helmet-to-helmet against the opposing offensive lineman. So for the 3 technique, what they're referring to is a defensive tackle who is offset to the outside shoulder of the guard. And so that's Kevin Williams' position. And for that position, you need explosiveness because it's designed to get the defensive tackle to penetrate the line of scrimmage, to disrupt running plays, and to attack the offense during passing plays as a pass rusher. The other defensive tackle is commonly called a nose tackle. So you've got the under tackle with Kevin Williams' position, and then the nose tackle with the other defensive tackle position. And that position typically is somebody you want, a big guy, 330-pound guy who eats up. Pat Williams, exactly. Perfect example of a defensive tackle. Eats up space, demands double teams because he's so big and powerful. Can disrupt running lanes and cut and account for the cutback runs too. So those are the 2 types of positions we're looking at. And this draft is apparently deep in defensive tackles, but we'll start out with the top 2, which we're not likely to get, but let's talk about them anyway. So first we've got Sharif.
Actually, before you start, should mention the contract status of the 4 starters on our defensive line, that all 4 are unrestricted free agents at the end of the year, which is a very rare thing. So.
That's right. So it wouldn't be surprising if we take a defensive end as well. Next on the list, I've got Jesse Williams. This is our 5th player we'll look at. Jesse Williams is out of Alabama, 6'3", 323 pounds, 32-inch arm length, 9 3/8-inch hands. Projected, this is based on film study by one of the sites, and I can't remember which, but they projected him as 5'3", 5'3", 40-yard dash, 30 bench press reps. He plays both tackle positions, but mostly nose tackle. Looks like a solid 2-gap player. Blocked a kick, which a couple of other ones did too.
Yeah.
It's always nice. I'm looking at him, and he's strong, clearly really, really strong. Yes. But you don't look at him and go, oh, my God, that's an athlete. that I mean he gets by being strong and having hustle and so he looks like a third round pick or later to me. What are your thoughts on Williams?
I suspect he goes earlier, but not because I read anything, but just because he is. It seems like NFL strong. That definitely was exactly the same impression. Like the technique wasn't great. He wasn't always getting his hands up and everything. He didn't look like a great athlete, but he really looked. He got low and he was strong, and they having trouble moving him around. He ends up on the ground a lot. Like it just seems like he's knocked down a lot for a guy who was getting low. I don't know. I don't know what the deal is with that. It's also worth pointing out that he played for awesome defense in Alabama. He was only there for 1 year. He played in 13 games, and he stood out. He was great. But he's a JUCO transfer. He didn't get a bunch of years in at Alabama's level of competition. For him, he'd be playing probably fewer downs than the other guys. We'd be putting him in run situations. We need that. We have room for that. Our run defense can certainly use improvement, and we really have to worry about it if Kevin Williams isn't around in a couple of years, what we're going to do. But he's, not elite speed, not running up and down the line, but strong.
Yeah, another thing I noticed with him too is when plays went out to the perimeter, he wasn't the most fluid and capable of cutting through the clutter and getting past defenders and stuff. He was sort of stumbling over people and stuff. So yeah. There's that.
Yeah.
So that's our take on the linebackers, top 5 linebackers that we see in this draft.
Defensive lineman.
Defensive lineman, yeah, linebackers last week. Defensive lineman, thank you. If we haven't talked about defensive tackle that you like, put your comments leave your comments below and share the videos, of course, and like them and all that stuff. And we'll look at cornerbacks next. So, Rick, you got any self-promotion you want to do?
Just promote this, help us out, let people know about it. And again, I'll repeat, get in your opinions before the draft.
Exactly.
It doesn't count if you put some guy in after the draft. Oh, you should have talked about
I had, yeah.
Exactly. These things are dated. Look out.
Exactly.
So get on it now.
So let's wrap this for Minnesota Vikings Chat podcast, MinnesotaVikingsChat.com. Follow us on Facebook at Facebook.com/Minnesota Vikings Chat, on Twitter at Twitter.com/MNVikingsChat, and use the Vikings Chat hashtag when talking about the Vikings, of course, so we can find you. Until our next podcast before the draft, that's a wrap. Go Vikings.
Go Vikings.